Spoiler warning for the Star Wars original trilogy, and to an extent the prequels too.
Ow!
Hey Raven, didn't expect you to be here despite the fact we agreed to co-op, wrote the script together, and I edited this with both your avatar and your lines.
Okay? What's the catch?
Commentary material. This video.
Star Wars, eh? Well, I guess this could work. It's a lot better than commentating on a Gravity Falls related video essay from 3 fucking years ago.
Yeah, I guess so.
Wait a minute. Isn't that a bomb planted below your shoe?
Probably not important.
Uh-huh. Well, in that case...
I guess we just cover this, then the bomb will definitely deactivate.
Let's hope so.
Wait a sec, OC and Avatar co-ops drive me up the wall. I think it's probably very obvious, but there was a change in editor midway through. Everything past this point was done by Raven. I'm only coming back here in post because I'm checking the video one last time before it goes up. Alright, so to give some context, Star Wars is a thing that exists, created by George Lucas. It had a sequel called The Empire Strikes Back.
Lots of people loved Empire Strikes Back. So much, in fact, that it has now earned $550 million worldwide. Apparently one person doesn't like it that much. That person being Plagiarisms.
You can imagine we thought it was the greatest thing since canned pillows, given that we're covering it.
Luckily, I have some knowledge on the movie that can help us out.
And I have brought a grand total of 0 contribution.
With all that said, let's begin.
Empire Strikes Back is considered to be the best Star Wars movie, apparently. I don't agree. If you've seen my review of Empire Strikes Back and my final ranking in the Rise of Skywalker review, Empire was the least impressive of the original 6 Lucas Star Wars films. And that got me thinking, how could Empire Strikes Back be the lowest scored of the OG 6? Keep in mind, OT fanatics are the one that bloat this film up above everything else, and Empire Strikes Back also happens to be the Star Wars film that George Lucas had the least to do with. So the point I'm bringing up is that Empire Strikes Back is the weakest of the original 6 movies, instead of being the best one.
Citation needed, because you throw claims around without any significant weight. Me saying the feet pics or it didn't happen would hold just as much weight. Suppose I ought to clarify what I mean by citation needed. That is directed at this film being the one that George Lucas had the least to do with, not necessarily that Empire is the most praised of the films. That's kind of common knowledge.
Can I just say that I really hate the tone of this video? Like, again, you don't like the movie, but god damn, you act like Mark Hamill killed your dog or something. Get ready for the tone to sour the entire video. It will get worse from here.
I guess we wouldn't care as much if you didn't feel the need to instantly label those who consider this movie the best as OT fanatics.
And another thing, OT fanatics is just a blatant generalization, which you put out a lot in this video. Just placing subjective opinion as fact, or, as we'll see further down the road, objective.
I mean, we have Revenge of the Sith, which is the actual best. I originally expected Empire Strikes Back to be like number 3, but through analysis, Empire got knocked back by some stiff competition, and ended up being the weakest, and I'm not ashamed. It's the opposite of the sentiment OT fanboys have about Empire being the best, and the true way to make a Star Wars movie and that the prequels suck and blah 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 blah. So yeah, looking at it objectively, Empire is actually the weakest.
Oh boy, the word objective, my favorite.
Spoiler alert, barely anything in this video is objective. Most of these are opinion pieces, usually backed by faulty reasoning too. Mind you, the next sentence breaks this objectivity statement to pieces. I don't want to keep saying this seems like a you problem repeatedly, because that could easily get annoying real fast, so every time this happens, Raven's gonna sing a line from a song, but wildly out of context.
Wait, why me and not you?
Cause my singing sounds like a cat being dropped into a volcano.
Now are we attacking him for not having the same opinion as everyone else? Hell no. We are just arguing his reasons for said opinion.
On the subject of attacking, yeah, we told you it'd get worse. Because he felt the need to then call people fanboys. Don't you just look so reasonable right now?
What if I told you it gets much worse than that?
Oh good lord.
So let's look at why this movie is praised. Well, my personal reasons for it being the weakest can be bogged down to different reasons.
Let's look at why this is praised. Immediately rambles about thing he doesn't like.
You said forever, now I drive alone past your street.
Oh yeah, there's that. You said this would be objective, and then you immediately say afterwards that you're gonna look at why you personally don't like this video. You know, subjectively. As in the opposite of objective. God, this video is about as consistent as my sleep schedule.
Well, first, it's the least eventful of the OG6. The Phantom Menace sets up the saga and the roots of everything. Attack of the Clones details the origins of the Clone Wars. Revenge of the Sith is the most eventful, and details the rise of the Empire and the end of the Clone Wars. A New Hope details the first major victory the Rebellion had, and Return of the Jedi details the end of the Galactic Civil War and the change in power. Looking at Empire Strikes Back, the least happens in it. It's the most like a side story. Sure, a lot happens to the characters, but event-wise, it's quite lacking.
Wait, how could this be the most like a side story when Empire has a lot happening to the characters and shows a lot of character development? You cut this out, I'll make it a side story, and the trilogy makes less sense character-wise. An example being how calm Luke is when he walks into Jabba's whatever. He does this because in Empire, he ran in head first and lost a hand because of it. TLDR, character development is important.
Also, we get to see Luke fighting against Darth Vader, and how the later battle made him lose his hand in the first place. I'll explain more when the time comes.
To further point out, you do realize that more events doesn't necessarily entail better. In fact, if a film is too eventful, it doesn't have much time to dedicate to anything, really. Not unless they make the movie much longer.
Not to mention that the story entails how the Empire is still on the winning side of the war, considering how they beat the rebels in this film.
Essentially, the whole point is to re-establish how threatening the Empire is and also to display how much power they have, given that after this movie, the rebels are on the losing side.
And here's something I really love about this, completely missing the fact that this movie, along with the other movies in the original trilogy, tell the story of the hero's journey. Think about it. In Empire, we headed to the losing all hope portion of the hero's journey, which Lucas himself takes as his format with the first 3 movies in the series. A New Hope is the initial setup of the story where the main protagonist learns of his heritage and joins the fight against the Empire. Empire Strikes Back is the portion where the villains gain a major victory over the hero, making it a low point where the hero has nowhere to go but up. Return of the Jedi bounces back in the hero's journey. Basically, the hero learns from his past mistakes, and with all the training and work he has to put into himself, he finally gets the victory over the villain. You see, JJ, the original trilogy is all about the hero's journey. Empire Strikes Back wouldn't need all this shit you see throughout from the prequels because the prequels are in and of themselves an expansion to that hero's journey, not a piece of it. Come on, this isn't a fucking pizza. Point is, you can get this information from YouTube, a writing class, or just by reading Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, as those resources paint the hero's journey in full. Oh, I almost forgot! Tsuyoku nareru ryu wo shita boku wo tsurete susume.
The Imperial attack on Hoth feels like it could have been in a comic and nobody would have batted an eye. And the attack itself doesn't do that much, since the rebels regroup by the end.
The events on Hoth have importance, since while yes they regroup, they no longer have a base of operations and therein are at a significant disadvantage and are on the back foot for the rest of the trilogy until the very end.
And it also has the least interesting title of the OG6. It expands the universe, but the events happening in the present isn't very interesting.
Hello from the other side.
Since it will come up, the twist is insanely overrated, and I can't speak for it, because of the countless dickheads who spoiled it online when I first learnt to use a computer. Thanks a lot. Point is, when a plot point or twist becomes so iconic, it dates so poorly. Just like Planet of the Apes, it's outright impossible to not spoil the I am your father plot twist. You really need to live in an isolated cult with zero internet to not have it spoiled.
Okay! Homie! Bro! Just because something is iconic doesn't mean it dates poorly. Sure, it's annoying to some, but it's not dated by today's standards in some cases. I mean, how many people do you see going around in public with freaking Pikachu merch?
Also, the plot twist is spoiled constantly, but how is that the movie's fault? Mayor Bellwether? Go to jail, you stupid sheep. Also, good plot twists can work even when they're spoiled. This twist works because of how much it affects Luke. Twists don't just rely on surprise, ones that do, like the aforementioned Bellwether, have nothing upon research. I meant rewatch, and only exist to shock people, when even if you take out the shock value of the Darth Vader reveal, it still has a lot left.
In other words, the Darth Vader reveal had a lot of build-up to it compared to other twists like, say, Prince Hans being the villain with no build-up whatsoever.
And it completely changed the trajectory of the story, since now Darth Vader is no longer seen as completely evil by Luke. It's unlikely Luke would have tried to turn Darth Vader if he didn't have this information. Wanna thank Blaze the movie fan for putting this one out? Sure, it may be common sense now, but twists like this were really something special at the time. Hell, you can find reactions from way back when that show people reacting to the twist.
No, Luke. I am your father. No! It's not true. That's impossible. Search your feelings. You know it to be true. No!
Oh, right. Hades, we gotta talk.
Speaking of movie moments, this movie is insanely cheesy. Scruffy looking nerf herder, and an average romance that has been too overbloated. This romance trope has been done to death. You seen how many Han Solos are out there now?
Star-Lord? Han Solo? Really? As someone who is a big fan of the MCU, I can tell you that Star-Lord is a way more developed character compared to Han Solo. Han Solo doesn't have any of the daddy issues that Star-Lord does, and the romance between Star-Lord and Gamora has a lot more chemistry, whereas the relationship between Han and Leia is a lot like Romeo and Juliet in a sense. There is no other comparison other than asshole characters with girlfriends in space.
Furthermore, I'm asking how there being a similar character archetype to Han devalues Han's character in and of itself. By the way, don't think you can get away with cherry picking poor lines in Empire, because I can do the same with the other movies.
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No. No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
So love has blinded you.
Governor Tarkin, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
Just as a side note, this is specifically the dialogue, the actors are fine. I get this is still an issue with Empire, but it exists in every other film you're calling better than this.
Maybe it stood out for its time, but it's dated today. Plus, I don't think the Han and Leia side of the story, as in escaping the Empire on the Millennium Falcon, is very interesting.
And I will always love you.
Remember when he said it's the worst looking at objectivity, and how the title at least implies some level of objectivity?
When we're dedicating this film to a lot of the same, it doesn't make it very intriguing. Whenever I think of Empire, I tend to forget the long chase sequence at face value.
I'm so confused. Like, you imply that the film is the same most of the way through, but your only example is a flight scene. While showing footage of the Battle of Hoth, something totally different.
And that's giving the benefit of the doubt, especially since the chase scenes have more significance to the story than what you are leading on.
If you don't like the chase scenes, that's fine, but your reasoning behind it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, Raven, your musical number.
'Cause you're hot, then you're cold, you're yes, then you're no, you're in, then you're out, you're up, then you're down.
And Dagobah and Hoth aren't interesting as locations. Let's start with Hoth. Hoth has no other purpose than to be the location of the rebel base, and while it's a new terrain, I really am not interested in it, as said in my initial review.
I came in like a wrecking ball.
I'm curious as to why Hoth only having one purpose is necessarily a bad thing. If it was purposeless, I'd totally get it, but to be honest, you're not elaborating, and it's beginning to confuse me.
I said Dagobah was eerie and mysterious, which is great for atmosphere, but on the surface, it also isn't that interesting. I rarely am one for swamps. They just aren't interesting. And there isn't much to this planet aside from the intriguing Darkside Cave.
Oh boy, we get to discuss my most favorite thing in Star Wars. Yay!
God, this is practically a musical at this point.
Got a long list of ex-lovers, they'll tell you I'm insane.
And I'll concur. Anyway, I love how you totally gloss over the cave and also expect the planets to be these wildly interesting locations. Most locations in Star Wars are based off of real concepts, usually pushed to their extremes. So aside from personal taste that is never elaborated on, there's no reasons for these planets in particular to be bad.
Tatooine is a whole desert as a planet, and Endor is a forest so large that it would make the forests in Gravity Falls, Oregon wet their pants.
Or how about Mustafar being a glorified volcano, and Coruscant being a city that'd make Tokyo weep in shame? TLDR, no.
Then we've got Yoda, another example of an over-bloated aspect. Yoda isn't that compelling as a character in this movie. Just like everything else, Yoda was spoiled with me, and the backwards talking and everything isn't quite for my taste. And we're also shown a nuded fraction of his power when he lifts the X-Wing. That's really it. It's really the prequels where the character shines, where we get to see him use a lightsaber and pull off these incredible stunts with Christopher Lee in Attack of the Clones. That's a real achievement.
Ah, hell nah! You diss my man Yoda and get away with it.
Yoda's whole role is as a mentor character, something you don't even address. His wisdom and guidance is far more of what makes Yoda Yoda than how he talks.
For the wisdom part of his character, going back to the cave scene in Empire, he tells Luke to leave his weapons behind before going into the cave. Of course, Luke doesn't listen to him, and as a result, he battles with Darth Vader, which is revealed to be an image of Luke himself. This puts the fear aspect of the failure into account and develops Luke as a character a whole lot more than you might think.
If you prefer the prequels Yoda, then fine. However, there's a lot more to a character than crazy flips and brutally murdering people. You, throughout this video, sort of undermine how important character actually is. To further expand on this idea, because I didn't really expand on it well in the original video, what I mean by this is that you have judged Yoda this entire time just based on his feats, when there's far more to a character than what they can do.
Time for me to sing again. You are my fire, the one desire, believe when I say I want it that way.
These songs just get weirder and weirder.
Best Man is actually pretty good, and Lando's excellent. The new cast members are brilliant, especially Billy D. Williams, but this movie is just so dated as mentioned before. It has the villain kills his own name cliche, which doesn't work most of the time, because it makes no sense. It just makes the villain come off as arrogance. And thinking it from a strategic perspective, learning that failure means death, it would lower morale and probably cause defection or desertion. I think the war thing was done way better in the prequel films, because we're free from this cliche unless you count Order 66 or the Separatists, but it's done in a way where it makes narrative sense, and Palpatine has a reason to do it. But this cliche is something Disney has really embraced, and this shit happens for no reason. Take the first episode of Star Wars Rebels. First Jedi you've ever seen, sir? Jesus! Callus, have a little compassion. You and this random stormtrooper are essentially stranded, and you decide to lower your chance of survival by kicking this guy off for trying to light the mood? Shame on you!
This is so irrelevant to the main point that it hurts me. So to address your initial anger and confusion, Vader killing his own soldiers could be due to him being kinda an unstable prat at sometimes. This can be shown later in the movie when Vader is struck by Luke in their fight, and he instantly loses his shit and cuts off his hand. Doing this could also work in order to get the other Imperial officers to work harder, since if they know that failure equals death, they would obviously want to try a lot harder to succeed.
Also, what do Disney and the Star Wars animated series have to do with anything? Adding this in comes off as you showing your hate boner for the Disney Star Wars movies and cartoons. Stop flashing us, you weirdo! There are kids in the room!
Hey, no cutting!
That's another thing. A lot of Disney-fied Imperial stuff is based on this movie. Especially the lazy attempts to make the Empire evil by doing evil stuff without regard for why anyone would follow the Empire if they publicly do this.
Okay, but why is this the Empire's fault? You mentioned it takes inspiration from this movie, however, them taking inspiration from it doesn't change a thing about it. Also, yes, it would be vital to show the evil threat being evil. People follow the Empire because, well, okay, I'm bullshitting. Why do you think the rebels exist? Anybody who isn't a rebel obeys the Empire because they die otherwise. Anyone who opposes them ends up getting killed.
Not every evil threat has to have a reason for the threat being evil in the first place. I mean, come on! You don't see Bill Cipher mucking around like a kid in a candy store that was once a pure soul, but now just turns evil at the top of a hat for some bullshit reason.
I used to be an innocent man, then a bartender called me fat.
What the fuck?!
And to elaborate on the point Raven just made, and a villain can still be entertaining without necessarily having a reason to be evil. Not everything has to necessarily be sympathetic or even really have a justification behind their actions. Some people are just evil, and those pure evil villains can still be entertaining, provided that they're still well characterized, I guess. Also, I've removed a point after this one because it was, for lack of a better term, shit.
Even the music is dated. I've heard it a million times. The Imperial March has worn off its welcome after the first 50,000 times I heard it. Revenge of the Sith's music is timeless, but the soundtrack for Empire Strikes Back just needs to stop being played. I've gotten sick of it. It's not bad, but goddamn, I'm just sick to death of hearing it all the damn time. Just put on Battle of the Heroes for once.
How many times do you think I can get away with asking how it's the movie's fault?
I mean, it's not like hearing All I Want for Christmas Is You every single year during Christmas time. Don't get me wrong, I love the song, but I think it's way overplayed.
I mean, even if it was, again, it still isn't a hit to the actual music. I'd like to argue that Revenge of the Sith's OST is played significantly less, so it's had less time to wear out its welcome, as opposed to hearing Empire's soundtrack every fucking day. So there's a significant reason that you might prefer Revenge of the Sith's soundtrack.
I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know.
Okay, I need to calm down.
You think?
Overall, I think the reason Empire Strikes Back isn't that good is because it's just dated. The story is dated, the music is dated, and the concept have just been done to death. And pop culture afterwards really needs to stop mimicking this movie. This movie has been overblown, and that's what I really hate. People just reference this movie way too much, and it's just lowered my perception of the film. And there's also the fact that it's just not that great. The locations like Dagobah and Hoth aren't very impressive. I'm sorry, it's just not that good. It's hard for me to explain why the movie is overrated beyond that. People just tout this as the best movie ever, when really it's not that at all. Maybe this can be a foothold for the argument that this movie has been blown way out of proportion.
High objective language, you actually return, making this feel even more weird and like you're trying to pass your opinion off as fact.
It's not the movie's fault that people try to copy it. The same argument about Empire can be said for literally any movie out there. For example, Shrek was an influential animated film for its time, so much so that Disney wanted a piece of that pie with Chicken Little. That failed miserably in more ways than one, but we shouldn't pin the blame on Shrek for that.
Anyway, he just plays his end screen for a whole 20 seconds. So final thoughts, I guess.
Let me just say this right now. This video is a pretty good example of what not to do when talking about a movie, especially its effect on pop culture and the fandom as a whole. As I said in the beginning, the tone was atrocious. It just soured the whole viewing experience of the video for me. That, and you seem to not understand the movie completely. My advice would be to rewatch the film you are talking about multiple times to make sure you understand all the details in the plot. Otherwise, it will end up being something like this. I hope this helps. If it doesn't, oh well, at least I'm in a co-op com I can be proud to be a part of for once.
Okay, so as I've probably drilled into your brain at this point, this video has a weird thing with flip-flopping between subjective and objective, which hold two very different ideas in mind. While the reasoning behind subjectivity can make no sense, subjectivity in and of itself cannot properly be disproven. Objectivity is a completely different monster entirely. Honestly, I'd suggest picking a lane and sticking to it, because at least then it isn't some pseudo-objective video. Furthermore, I understand the idea that you seem like the type of guy who prefers something more action-oriented, which is probably another reason you should stick to one or the other. You aren't wrong for your opinion, I just don't believe there's too much of a solid basis for most of them. And hey, if even the problems exist after we've had this explained to you, and you still don't like Empire, that's fine. That's totally fair, I'd get it. Huh, good thing we conveniently survived that explosion.
Yeah, no broken bones for me.
Why, hello that- Oh no, you're banned from here.
Is this because of the pizza incident? Because look, that was just a social experiment.
I wasn't even there, so...
I was just enjoying myself and then over 200 stores decided to ban me.
How are you not on a blacklist?
Do you think Fractured Light is my real name?